The church was heavy with silence, broken only by the muffled sobs of mourners and the echo of organ music that seemed to stretch endlessly across the vaulted ceiling. White lilies surrounded the closed coffin at the front, their fragrance mixing with the bitter sting of grief in the air. I stood frozen in my black dress, clutching my phone in one trembling hand, unable to focus on the words of the priest. My husband, my companion of 40 years, was gone. That was what everyone around me believed. That was what I had forced myself to believe. But then, as the priest's voice solemnly intoned the final prayers, my phone buzzed. A new message lit up the screen, and when I read it, my blood turned to ice. I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Dear friends, before I go on, I need you to imagine yourself in my place. What would you do if you received such a message at a funeral, your husband's funeral? Would you dismiss it as a cruel prank? Or would you cling to the terrifying possibility that he was still out there, alive? Please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because what I'm about to share will make you question everything you think you know about trust and betrayal. My hands shook so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. I looked around the church, at the bowed heads of family members, at the neighbors who had come to pay their respects, at the solemn faces of people who believed they were witnessing the end of a man's life. And all I could hear, louder than the priest's words, louder than the sobs, was that message repeating itself in my mind. I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. How could it be? The doctors had declared him dead. The funeral director had arranged everything. I had signed papers, made calls, chosen flowers, even written the obituary that had appeared in yesterday's newspaper. I had watched them close the coffin before the service began. I had seen them seal it with my own eyes. There was no mistake. There couldn't be. And yet, if anyone in the world knew how to trick death, it would have been my husband. A cold sweat ran down my spine as I tried to steady my breathing. I remembered the nights, just weeks ago, when he had come home late, his clothes smelling of rain and smoke, his eyes filled with secrets he never explained. I remembered the whispered phone calls he would end the moment I walked into the room. And I remembered the last words he had spoken to me before his supposed heart attack. If anything ever happens to me, don't believe it. At the time, I had thought it was just paranoia, a man growing old and suspicious of shadows. But now those words cut into me like glass. I typed back, my fingers clumsy and uncertain. Who are you? My message was swallowed instantly. But before I could even lower the phone, a reply appeared. I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust anyone in the family. The blood drained from my face. My eyes flickered instinctively toward the front pew, where my son sat rigid beside his wife, their expressions unreadable. My sister-in-law dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, though her tears seemed suspiciously dry. Even the priest's voice suddenly sounded distant, almost rehearsed, as if the entire room were part of a carefully constructed lie. The coffin at the front of the church loomed larger in my vision, heavy and closed. Why was it closed? Why had they insisted so firmly that I should not see the body? They said it was because the heart attack had been violent, that the body had not been suitable for an open casket. But in that moment, with those words glowing on my screen, I began to wonder, was there even a body inside at all? Or was it all a performance, a staged burial for a man who was still alive somewhere, somehow watching me through unseen eyes? The tears that ran down my face were no longer just for grief. They were for terror, for betrayal, for the sick realization that everything I thought I knew about my husband's death and about the people around me was unraveling. That was the moment, standing in the middle of my husband's funeral. that I knew my life was about to change forever. When the choir's hymn faded and the murmurs of the congregation rose behind me, I found myself caught between two worlds. The world of mourning that everyone else occupied, and the world of suspicion that had just opened up beneath my feet. My knees felt weak, and the polished floor of the church seemed to tilt beneath me, as though I were standing at the edge of a cliff. I tried to steady my breathing, but each exhale was uneven, rattling through the silence I carried inside. I pressed my phone to my chest, its cold metal trembling against my skin. The words burned in my mind like fire carved into stone. I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Was it madness? A cruel prank designed to break me at my weakest moment? Or was it the truth, something too terrible to speak aloud? I sat down heavily in the pew, folding my hands in my lap the way my mother had taught me to when I was a little girl. But my fingers would not stay still. They fidgeted, restless, as though they wanted to claw their way out of this nightmare. Round me, the sounds of grief continued, the sniffles, the stifled sobs, the heavy sighs of people who claimed to care. But grief was no longer my only companion. Doubt had crept in, cold and unwelcome, wrapping itself around my heart like a snake. I looked at the faces around me, my son, rigid, his gaze fixed straight ahead as though afraid to meet my eyes. His wife, leaning against him with a performance of sorrow so polished it could have belonged on a stage. The lawyer, seated in the corner, his hands folded calmly, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. None of them looked at me. None of them asked if I was all right. They mourned a man in the coffin, but none of them seemed to notice the widow unraveling beside them. And that was when the thought occurred to me, chilling and unbearable. What if they already knew? The phone buzzed again in my purse. This time I dared not take it out in front of them. Instead, I pressed the bag tightly against my side, as though clutching a lifeline. My throat was dry, my lips trembling with words I couldn't voice. I wanted to scream, to stand up and demand answers, to insist they open the coffin so I could see with my own eyes who was truly inside. But I remained silent, because the message had warned me. Don't trust anyone. The priest's voice rose again, his prayer echoing over the crowd. We commend our brother's soul to God's mercy. But the words struck me differently now. Was this truly my husband's soul being commended? Or the soul of another, a stranger sacrificed to create the illusion of death? I remembered the weeks leading up to this day. His strange behavior, the shadows in his eyes, the way he double-locked the study door and shoved papers into drawers the moment I walked in. He had even told me, in his gruff way, if something ever happens, don't just accept it. Look deeper. At the time, I dismissed it as paranoia. Now, those words returned with cruel clarity. The coffin seemed to grow larger the longer I stared at it, as though it were no longer a vessel of mourning but a riddle demanding to be solved. My body shook with the weight of grief, but it was grief contaminated with suspicion. Grief alone is heavy, but grief poisoned with doubt is unbearable. I wanted to cry, to collapse, to bury my face in my hands and scream, but another instinct rose stronger, to remain still, to observe, to endure. I told myself I could not let anyone see my fear. If the message was true, if there was danger, then every glance, every sigh, every tear of mine could betray that I knew. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to wipe my tears like any grieving widow would, to keep my face blank. Inside, however, I was crumbling. For the rest of the service, I moved mechanically, standing when told to stand, sitting when told to sit, bowing my head when everyone else bowed theirs. But I was not truly present. My mind was replaying the message over and over again. Every word, every letter, When the final blessing ended and the pallbearers prepared to carry the coffin, I felt a scream rising in my chest. Don't let them take it. Don't let them bury him. Don't let them cover the truth forever. But I swallowed it, because I could not risk exposing what I knew not yet. As the coffin was lifted, my eyes darted to my son. For a fleeting second, he looked back at me. His eyes did not soften with grief. They hardened. It was the kind of look that said, "Don't ask questions." And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Maybe I wasn't just doubting the message. Maybe I was doubting the people around me, the ones I had called family. When the church doors opened and the coffin began its slow march to the waiting hearse, the phone buzzed again, muffled in my purse. My pulse thundered as I slipped my hand inside, careful not to draw attention. The screen glowed with 4 new words. 4 words that pulled me deeper into the abyss of fear and suspicion. "They're watching you now." And with that, my grief transformed into something new. It was no longer just mourning for the man I thought I had lost. It was mourning for the world I thought I could trust. The service was over, but the unease inside me only grew stronger. Mourners moved slowly into the hall where coffee and sandwiches had been prepared, their hushed voices carrying polite condolences that sounded strangely hollow in my ears. I drifted among them like a ghost myself, smiling when expected, nodding absently. But my mind was locked on the coffin still resting at the front of the church. My husband's coffin. Or at least, that was what I had been told. People whispered around me, their eyes sliding over me with sympathy that felt rehearsed. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years leaned into close, murmuring, "You're so strong. We'll help you manage the papers." A neighbor placed a hand on my arm, not to comfort, but to ask if the insurance company had already been notified. The lawyer, always lurking nearby, offered his softest voice as he said, "We'll push the cremation quickly. Less pain that way. Best for everyone." Best for everyone or best for them? I found myself staring at him longer than was polite. His suit was immaculate, his smile calm, but his eyes flickered too quickly toward my purse, toward the phone inside it. Did he somehow know what I had received? Or was it my paranoia twisting ordinary glances into sinister ones? I wanted to brush off the thought, to tell myself I was imagining things. But then another memory hit me. My husband had warned me once, weeks ago, when we were walking home at dusk. If anything ever happens, don't trust the people who show up first with a solution. Those words replayed now, echoing as I looked at the lawyer pressing me for immediate signatures, at my son avoiding my gaze, at Lena, my daughter-in-law, comfortably seated in a corner, sipping her tea as if the day were nothing more than a tedious formality. I gripped my cup so tightly my knuckles turned white. The porcelain burned against my palms, but I held on as if letting go would mean falling apart. My phone vibrated again, and I excused myself, walking quickly to the empty corridor behind the church hall. My heart pounded as I unlocked the screen. The message was short, almost cruel in its simplicity. "They're watching. Don't speak." I pressed the phone against my lips to stifle a gasp. My eyes darted to the doorway, expecting someone to follow, but the corridor was empty. The silence so complete I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I typed back anyway, my fingers trembling. "Where are you? Who is watching me?" The answer came instantly, as though the sender were watching me type. "Look closer. Nothing is what it seems." A chill wrapped around me. I leaned against the wall, struggling to steady my breathing. I thought about the closed coffin, about the refusal to let me see the body, about the lawyer insisting on cremation, about my son's hardened eyes. What if this wasn't grief clouding my mind? What if I was finally seeing the truth I had ignored for years? When I returned to the hall, I paid closer attention. My son was whispering with Lena in the corner, their voices sharp, their eyes darting toward me when they thought I wasn't looking. Another relative quickly slipped an envelope into the lawyer's hand, their faces tight with urgency. And when I passed by the table with the flowers from the coffin, I noticed something strange. Beneath the roses and lilies, there was a folded slip of paper half hidden by the stems. My breath caught in my throat. Could it be another message? I reached out, pretending to adjust the flowers, and slipped the paper into my sleeve before anyone noticed. My heart hammered as I walked calmly to the restroom, locked the door, and unfolded the note with trembling hands. In shaky handwriting, only 7 words were scrawled across the page. Don't trust Lena. Don't trust Max, my son. My own son's name written there, beside hers. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the small bench, the note fluttering in my lap. Could it be true? Could my own flesh and blood be part of this? Or was this part of some twisted scheme to turn me against them? I closed my eyes, tears burning, but I refused to let them fall. The message on my phone had warned me. The note in my hands confirmed it. Something larger, darker, was unfolding around me, and I was standing right at its center. When I returned to the hall, I looked at them differently. My son smiled stiffly, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. Lena raised her teacup, her lips curving in a smirk that felt like mockery. The lawyer tapped his watch as though reminding me of time running out. Every gesture seemed loaded now, every word poisoned. I knew then that I could no longer trust the faces I had once loved. The real question was, what would I do with this knowledge? And just as that thought crystallized, my phone buzzed once more. This time, the message was chillingly precise. They know you found the note. That night, long after the funeral guests had gone and the silence of my empty house pressed in like a heavy cloak, I sat at the kitchen table with both notes in front of me, the text on my phone and the slip of paper found beneath the funeral flowers. My husband's words from years ago haunted me. If you ever doubt, look in the places we marked. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. At the time, I had dismissed it as one of his eccentric warnings. He had always been a cautious man, the type to double lock doors and keep spare cash hidden in envelopes taped behind drawers. I used to laugh, telling him he was paranoid. But tonight, in the glow of a single lamp, those words returned with a vengeance. No longer paranoid, but prophetic. I reached for the old wooden box he had kept in his study. It had been years since I dared open it. Inside were small tokens of his meticulous life, a leather-bound journal, a ring he never wore, keys that belonged to locks long forgotten. My fingers trembled as I opened the journal, the faint scent of tobacco and dust rising from its pages. There, in his neat handwriting, I found entries that chilled me. Meetings with people Lena cannot know about. Suspicious calls from Max's new associates. Warn her if I disappear, everything is not as it seems. My breath caught. These weren't ramblings. They were breadcrumbs, left intentionally for me to follow. Had he known his death would come like this? Had he prepared me for this very moment? As I flipped through the journal, one page stood out. In bold letters, he had underlined a single sentence twice. If they tell you I'm gone, don't believe it until you see me with your own eyes. I closed the book quickly, as though the words themselves could burn me. I had not seen his body. The coffin had been sealed. The insistence on cremation suddenly seemed less like tradition and more like erasure. And the voice on my phone, the impossible message at the funeral, was it him? Could he somehow still be alive? Or was someone cruelly using his words to drive me into madness? I leaned back, pressing the palms of my hands into my eyes until I saw bursts of light. Memories tumbled forward, him warning me about new friends Max had made, about debts whispered through late-night phone calls. I had overheard fragments, talk of investments, of money owed, of promises that sounded more like threats. Whenever I pressed, he dismissed me gently, saying, "It's under control." But the way his jaw tightened told me it wasn't. Then there was Lena. The day she first came into our lives, he had pulled me aside and said quietly, "That woman smiles with her lips, not her eyes. Be careful." I had brushed it off as jealousy or overprotectiveness. Now, I realized he had seen what I had refused to see. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch longer as I sat alone with the weight of these realizations. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the window made me flinch. My phone lay on the table, dark and silent, as though holding its breath. I wanted another message. I dreaded it, too. Finally, unable to resist, I whispered aloud, "If you're still out there, if it's really you, please, give me a sign." The silence was suffocating. I almost laughed at myself for speaking to an empty room. But then so faint I thought I imagined it. I heard the distant chime of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It hadn't worked in years. My husband used to be the only one who knew how to fix it. My blood turned to ice. I rose slowly, every step toward the clock a battle between fear and hope. Its hands were moving again, ticking steadily, and taped to the glass door of its case was a tiny scrap of paper I was certain had not been there before. With trembling hands, I peeled it away. In the same unmistakable handwriting as the funeral note, it read, "You're in danger. They'll come for you next." I staggered back, clutching the paper to my chest. The clock ticked on, steady as a heartbeat, as though reminding me time was running out. My husband's warnings were no longer just memories. They were alive, unfolding in the present. And if he was still out there alive, hiding, watching, then the real question wasn't just who killed him. It was, who among us was desperate enough to finish what they started and silence me? Before I uncovered the truth, the next morning, the house felt different, not quieter, heavier, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hallway, each second echoing like a drumbeat of warning. I had slept barely 2 hours. The 2 notes and my husband's journal lying open on the nightstand beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his handwriting. "They'll come for you next." I rose before dawn, made coffee with trembling hands, and sat at the kitchen table. The sunlight creeping through the blinds was pale, ghost-like. My phone, which I had left on the counter, buzzed once. No caller ID. I stared at it but didn't answer. If it was him, he would send a message. If it was them, I wasn't giving them my voice to manipulate. Instead, I began a quiet inspection of my home, the way he used to do when he thought someone had been inside. I moved slowly from room to room, my fingers brushing over familiar objects, looking for anything out of place. It didn't take long to find the first sign. In the study, a drawer that had always stuck slightly when opening now slid out smoothly, as though someone had recently oiled it. Inside, my husband's papers were no longer in the neat stacks I had left them. They had been rifled through, shuffled, and at the very bottom, where he used to keep a spare key to his lockbox, there was nothing but a clean rectangle of dust where the key had been. I sat back on my heels, my breath caught in my throat. Someone had been here. Then I noticed the smell, faint, but sharp like Lena's perfume. That cloying vanilla she always wore, now mixed with something metallic. I moved on to the living room. The curtains were drawn an inch differently than I ever left them. The lampshade turned slightly askew. On the small table by the sofa was an envelope addressed to me, but in a hand I didn't recognize. I picked it up carefully, almost expecting it to explode. Inside was a single photo, me, standing at the funeral hall the day before, taken from behind, the time stamp in the corner. I felt the room spin. Whoever sent it had been close enough to photograph me but unseen. Beneath the photo was a note in block letters. Stop looking. Stop asking, or you'll join him. The letters swam in front of my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They were threatening me now, not just warning, threatening. I went to the window and peeked through the blinds. A car I didn't recognize sat across the street, its engine idling. Two figures inside. Their silhouettes didn't move, watching, waiting. I closed the blinds and forced myself to think. My husband had hidden things for a reason. If he was alive, he was trying to guide me. If he was dead, someone else was using his clues to manipulate me. Either way, sitting here frozen wouldn't help. I went back to the study and opened the journal again. On one of the last pages, there was a simple sketch of our house, every room marked with an X except one, the attic. In the margin, he had written, "If something happens to me, start here." The attic. I hadn't been up there in years. I dragged the ladder from the hall closet, my heart pounding like a drum. The attic smelled of dust and cedar. Light from the single bulb flickered weakly. Boxes lined the beams, filled with old Christmas decorations and forgotten photographs. In the far corner, beneath a tarp, was a small metal case I had never seen before. My husband's initials etched faintly on the lid. I crouched, hands trembling, and tried the latch locked. But when I turned it over, taped to the underside was a small key, the kind he used to hide in strange places. I fitted into the lock, and the latch clicked open with a sound that echoed too loudly in the stillness. Inside the case were bundles of papers, a flash drive, and a burner phone. On top of everything lay a note in his unmistakable handwriting. "If you're reading this, they know. Take the drive. Leave the house. Trust nobody." I sank onto the attic floor, clutching the note. My whole life had shifted into days. My husband wasn't just warning me. He had prepared a plan, evidence, escape. The floor creaked below me. I froze. That wasn't the wind. Someone was in the house. The sound came again, low, deliberate, a weight pressing against the floorboards beneath me. My pulse thundered in my ears. The attic was the last place I wanted to be trapped. Yet here I was with a metal case clutched to my chest, my husband's warning ringing in my mind. Trust nobody. For a moment I told myself it could be the house settling, a draft, a trick of my nerves. But then I heard it clearly. Footsteps, slow, calculated, coming from the hallway below. I pressed my palm against the attic floor, feeling every vibration as someone moved from room to room. My living room, then the kitchen, then silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Whoever it was, they knew how to move carefully. Too carefully. I tightened my grip on the case and slid toward the ladder. If I stayed up here, I'd be cornered. But if I went down, I'd be exposed. My husband had taught me long ago that fear makes you freeze, and freezing is exactly what they want. Taking a deep breath, I edged down the ladder, every rung creaking louder than it should. I stopped halfway when I heard a whisper. Not words, but the unmistakable low murmur of someone speaking into a phone. Then the shuffle of papers. My papers. I reached the last rung and peered into the hallway. The lights were off, but a faint glow spilled from the study, my study. I stepped lightly, barefoot on the wood, my heart slamming against my ribs. The closer I got, the clearer it became. Someone was sitting at my desk. A tall figure, back turned, hunched over the very journal I had found last night. My husband's journal. And then, without turning, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have opened the attic, Renata." I froze, my name, my secret. My blood ran cold. The intruder finally turned, the desk lamp casting half his face in shadow. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a burglar. He was someone I knew, someone I trusted. It was Arthur, my husband's oldest friend. Arthur, who had stood by me at the funeral. Arthur, who had hugged me when I nearly collapsed beside the coffin. Arthur, who had promised he'd look after me like a brother. But the look in his eyes now wasn't brotherly. It was sharp, calculating, the kind of look that measures value, not love. "You've made things complicated," he said, tapping the journal with one long finger. "He left too many breadcrumbs, and now you followed them." "That wasn't supposed to happen." I forced my voice not to tremble. "Why are you in my house?" He smiled, thin and humorless. "Because your husband owed answers. And since he's not here to give them, that responsibility falls to you." I clutched the metal case tighter, angling it behind my legs so he couldn't see. "I don't know what you're talking about." His smile widened, as though I just confirmed exactly what he suspected. "That's the problem. You don't know how much you already know." The phone in his hand buzzed once. He glanced at it, then back at me. "They're growing impatient. They want what he left behind. And now you've found it." My chest tightened. They, not just Arthur, not just my husband. A network, watching, pressuring. I edged backward toward the hallway. Arthur stood slowly, deliberately, blocking the doorway with his frame. "You're not leaving with that case, Renata." Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where? The front door was behind him, the windows too high. My only chance was to stall. "Arthur," I said, summoning a calm I didn't feel. "You were his friend. You stood by us. If he left something, he must have trusted me to keep it safe. Not you." For a fraction of a second, his jaw tightened, a flicker of doubt or rage. I couldn't tell. And in that heartbeat of hesitation, I acted. I swung the metal case hard, slamming it into the lamp. The bulb shattered, plunging the study into darkness. Arthur cursed, the sound raw and furious. I bolted down the hallway, clutching the case, my bare feet slapping against the floor. Behind me, his footsteps thundered. He was faster, stronger, and far too close. I reached the kitchen, fumbling for the back door. Locked. My hands shook as I tried to twist the dead bolt, but Arthur's shadow loomed across the wall. "Where will you run, Renata?" His voice was closer now, almost playful. "The house isn't yours anymore. It never was." I yanked at the door, desperate. The lock stuck. My heart screamed. Then, from outside, headlights swept across the window. A car pulling into the driveway. Relief flooded me until I remembered the photo. The threats. The warning. What if the car wasn't rescue? What if it was reinforcement? Arthur's hand reached out of the dark, brushing my shoulder. I spun around, case raised like a weapon. And that's when the knock came at the door. A single, sharp knock. The knock echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Just one, sharp, deliberate. Not the frantic pounding of a neighbor in need. Not the casual tapping of a delivery man. A message in itself. "I know you're inside." Arthur's fingers froze inches from my arm, his head snapping toward the door. For the first time since I had seen him in the study, I noticed a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Whoever was outside, he wasn't expecting them either. Another knock came, this time slower, heavier, as if the intruder wanted me to feel each vibration in my bones. I pressed my back against the door, the cold metal case still clutched to my chest, my breath ragged. Arthur raised a finger to his lips, silently commanding me to stay quiet. The nerve of him breaking into my home, hunting me through my own hallways, and now shushing me like a child. "Renata," a voice called from the other side, low, steady, almost kind. "Open the door. I know what you found." My knees weakened. The voice wasn't my husband's, but it carried a strange familiarity, as if I had heard it echo in my life before, tucked in some forgotten corner. Arthur moved closer, his whisper a hiss in the dark. "Don't answer. Whatever they promise you, it's a lie." I glared at him. "As if you're one to talk." The figure outside knocked again, 3 times in rhythm. Knock, 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 then silence. "Who are you?" I finally demanded, my voice cracking against the wood. "Someone your husband trusted," the voice replied. "Someone who knows the truth he died to protect." Arthur's jaw tightened. "Don't believe him. He's part of it." "Part of what?" My mind spun. 2 men, both claiming opposite truths. One a supposed friend turned intruder, the other a stranger cloaked in familiarity. Both after the same thing, both circling me like vultures. The doorknob rattled. My blood froze. They weren't going to wait for me to decide. Arthur lunged toward the door, but I darted in front of him, pressing my palm against the handle. For one terrifying second, our eyes locked, his cold, calculating, mine wild with defiance. Then, with a deep breath that tasted like surrender, I turned the knob. The door swung open. A man stood there, tall, coat collar pulled up against the night, his face shadowed by the porch light behind him. In his hand was not a weapon, but an envelope sealed with red wax. My husband's seal. The air left my lungs in a rush. Arthur swore under his breath, stepping back like he had been struck. "Impossible." The stranger looked past me, straight at Arthur. "You shouldn't be here." His voice carried the weight of authority, the kind that doesn't shout but commands nonetheless. Arthur sneered. "And you shouldn't have found her." The man shifted his gaze to me, his eyes catching the dim kitchen light at last. Calm, unreadable, dangerous in a different way. "Mrs. Richter, I need you to come with me now, before it's too late." Every nerve in my body screamed. "Trust no one." That was the last message from my husband. Yet here I stood between 2 men who both claimed to know his secrets. One had broken into my home, the other carried proof of his handwriting. Behind me, Arthur stepped forward again, his voice sharp. "If you leave with him, you'll never come back." The stranger extended the envelope toward me. "If you stay with him, you won't live to see tomorrow." My grip on the case tightened, the metal digging into my palms. My mind raced, my heart a drum in my chest. Every choice was a trap, every answer a betrayal. Then, somewhere deep in the night, my phone buzzed from the counter. A new message. I glanced at the screen. Just 3 words, written in my husband's unmistakable hand. "Go with him." The words on the phone screen burned into me like fire. Go with him. 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of everything I thought I knew and everything I feared. Arthur saw it too. His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening like a predator realizing the prey was slipping away. "That's not him," he spat. "It's a trick. Don't you see? They're using his handwriting now." But the stranger didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply held the envelope steady in the pale glow of the porch light. The wax seal caught the light just enough for me to see the initials stamped into it, my husband's initials. My chest ached. I had sealed letters with him at that very table years ago, when we wrote to relatives abroad. No one else would know that detail. The pressure of his hand, the tiny imperfection in the stamp. Renata, the stranger said softly, like he was coaxing me out of a nightmare. If you want answers, you have to leave. Tonight. Arthur lunged, grabbing my arm, his grip bruising. Don't you dare step out that door. Everything he says is a lie. If you go with him, you'll never come back alive. For a split second, time froze. The two men locked eyes over me, their hostility filling the room like smoke. My husband's words echoed in my mind. Trust nobody. Yet the phone in my hand, glowing faintly, whispered another truth. Go with him. I yanked my arm free from Arthur's grasp. If either of you cared about me, you wouldn't be tearing me into like this. Arthur hissed. Don't be foolish. But I stepped past him anyway, clutching the case against my chest, and crossed the threshold into the night. The stranger moved just enough to let me through, then shut the door firmly. The click of the lock final, like sealing a coffin. The cool air hit my face, sharp and damp with mist. The stranger gestured to a black car parked at the curb, engine idling. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. My stomach twisted. A sanctuary or a trap? Behind us, Arthur's fists pounded on the door. Renata, don't do this. His voice cracked with rage, maybe fear. They'll kill you before sunrise. The stranger didn't turn back. Move, he whispered. I followed, each step heavier than the last. My instincts screamed to run in the opposite direction, but my husband's ghost clung to me, pulling me forward. When we reached the car, the stranger opened the back door. Get in. My hand hovered on the doorframe, my reflection staring back at me from the dark glass. A tired, frightened woman who had already lost too much. I could hear Arthur's muffled shouting still coming from inside, the sound of glass breaking, the chaos of my home unraveling. I slid into the car. The door shut with a dull thud, sealing me inside. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something sterile, like hospitals. The driver's face was obscured by a cap pulled low. No words, no greeting, just silence. The stranger climbed in beside me, setting the sealed envelope carefully on my lap. Don't open it until I say, he warned. His voice was calm, but I heard the edge underneath. The car pulled away smoothly, the headlights carving tunnels through the misty night. My house grew smaller in the rear window, Arthur's shadow still visible at the door, his fists raised like a man cursing the heavens. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, fighting the urge to cry. Every part of me wanted to turn back, to lock the doors, to crawl under the covers and pretend none of this had ever happened. But deep down I knew there was no going back. Where are you taking me? I whispered. To the place your husband didn't want them to find, the stranger replied. I swallowed hard. And who are they? His gaze flicked toward me, unreadable. The people who killed him. My breath hitched. He's alive. Silence. I turned to face him fully. He has to be alive. He sent me those messages. Finally, the stranger spoke, his voice like a blade sliding from its sheath. Alive. Or not. He left instructions, and following them is the only way you survive. The car slowed suddenly, the driver muttering something I couldn't hear. The stranger's eyes sharpened. Ahead, in the glow of the headlights, I saw it. Another car blocking the road. Doors opening. Figures stepping out. Dark shapes against the mist. The driver cursed under his breath. The stranger reached for the door handle, his voice low and urgent. When I say run, you run. And don't look back. I clutched the case and the sealed envelope, my whole body trembling. Outside, one of the figures raised a flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness and landing squarely on my face. Found her. The stranger's hand tightened on my arm. Run! The moment the stranger whispered run, time fractured. My body moved before my mind could argue. I shoved the car door open, the night air hitting me like a slap, and sprinted into the mist. My shoes barely touched the asphalt before shouts erupted behind me. Stop her! Flashlights flared, beams slicing through the darkness. Shadows lunged toward me, heavy footsteps pounding. My lungs burned, my heartbeat drowning out every sound except the ragged gasp of my own breath. I clutched the metal case to my chest, the sealed envelope pressed against it. It felt heavier than stone, heavier than every memory, every betrayal, every warning I had ignored. Behind me, engines roared. The black car reversed sharply, tires screeching as the driver tried to cut off the approaching figures. I glanced back just long enough to see the stranger leap out, pulling something metallic from under his coat. A gun. The crack of a single shot split the night. A figure stumbled and collapsed. Chaos followed shouts, more gunfire, the screech of rubber on wet pavement. Keep running, the stranger shouted. I obeyed, darting into the tree line at the side of the road. Branches clawed at my arms, roots snagged at my feet, but I pushed forward, deeper into the darkness. I had lived 71 years, but I had never run like this, with life itself snapping at my heels. After what felt like forever, I burst into a clearing. The night was silent again, too silent. My breath came in ragged bursts, every nerve screaming that I was exposed. I pressed my back against a tree, clutching the case so tightly my knuckles ached. And then I heard him, the stranger's voice, low but urgent, from the shadows. Here, he emerged from the mist, breathless, his coat torn. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if I had chosen the wrong side. But in his hand was the envelope. My envelope. He held it out to me as if to remind me. This is why you're still alive. They won't stop now, he said. You've seen too much. I swallowed hard. Then tell me the truth. What is this? Why are they hunting me? Why does every path lead back to my husband? He crouched beside me, his face lit faintly by the moonlight filtering through the branches. His expression was grave, the kind of expression you only see in people who know more than they want to admit. Open it, he said. My hands shook as I slid a finger under the wax seal. It cracked with a sound that made my heart race. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a small photo. The photo was old, grainy, my husband standing with 3 men I had never seen before. All 4 wore the same expression, grim, alert, as though they were being watched even as the camera clicked. On the back, in my husband's hand, trust only the one who wasn't there that night. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a list, names, dates, places. Some I recognized, old family friends, neighbors, even Arthur's name scrawled halfway down. Others meant nothing to me. But next to several names was a single red X. What is this? I whispered. The stranger's jaw tightened. It's the ledger. Your husband's record of who was involved and who was silenced. My chest constricted. Silenced. He met my gaze. Dead. Or disappeared. The trees seemed to close in around me. My husband had kept secrets I could never have imagined. And now those secrets had become a map of death with me at the center. The stranger pointed at the list. Do you see the pattern? Every name marked with an X gone. Arthur's name is here too, but not crossed out. That's why he's desperate. He knows his time is running out. And you, he paused, his eyes narrowing. You're the last piece they can't control. I felt dizzy. My whole life, the funeral, the notes, The house had been a stage, and I had been stumbling blindly across it. From the distance, engines roared again. Headlights broke through the mist, sweeping across the clearing. They had found us. The stranger grabbed my arm, pulling me to my feet. It's not safe here. We need to move. But where? To finish what he started, he said, and to finally answer the question you've been afraid to ask. I stumbled beside him, clutching the photo and the list. And what question is that? He looked back at me, his eyes hard, unflinching. Whether your husband is truly dead. The headlights chased us through the trees like predators' eyes. The stranger pulled me forward, his grip iron, his pace relentless. Branches lashed against my arms, the ground uneven beneath my feet. But the only thing I could feel was the pounding in my chest. We broke through the tree line into a clearing where an abandoned chapel stood. Its steeple cracked, its windows blackened with time. The place smelled of damp stone and secrets. This is where it ends, the stranger said. Or where it begins, I thought. Inside, the chapel was dark except for the faint glow of candles flickering on the altar. My breath caught when I saw what lay there. A second case, identical to the one I had carried from the attic. My hands trembled. How is this possible? The stranger looked at me, his face grave. Because your husband left more than one trail. He knew one of us would reach you first. This, he gestured to the case, is the piece that completes the ledger. I set my case beside the one on the altar. Together they looked like twin guardians of a truth too heavy for one to bear. The stranger pulled a key from his coat pocket. Without a word, he unlocked the second case. Inside was a stack of documents so thick it looked like the weight of an entire life. Read, he said. The first page bore my husband's handwriting. My throat tightened as I traced the letters, his voice whispering back to me from beyond the grave. If you're holding this, it means they've turned against me or I've made them think I'm dead. Maybe both. I couldn't tell you the truth while I lived. It would have put you in danger. But now, you must know. The men I trusted were not friends. They were part of something older, larger, an agreement sealed decades ago. One I stumbled into when I was young and foolish. 4 years I paid the price, protecting you by carrying their secrets. But now, they want more. They want everything. And if they know you carry my name, you are already in their sights. Tears blurred the words, but I forced myself to keep reading. Arthur is one of them. He was meant to guard me, but his loyalty was never mine, it was theirs. And if you hear from him, know this. He will not hesitate to betray you. As for the others, they'll use every weapon, fear, doubt, even love to break you. Don't let them. Trust only the ones I marked safe. Everyone else is already gone, or soon will be. The last line made my blood run cold. And if you doubt whether I live or die, look not for me in the ground, but in the voices that reach you in the dark. I will guide you as long as I can. The paper slipped from my hands, landing on the stone floor. My husband dead, alive, or something in between had orchestrated this. He had left me breadcrumbs, fragments of truth scattered like shards of glass. The stranger picked up another document, his expression grim. Do you see? He wasn't just protecting you. He was protecting all of us. This ledger isn't about money or betrayal, it's about power. The kind of power people kill for. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside broke the silence. Voices carried through the night, closer, sharper. Arthur's voice among them. They're here, the stranger said. I grabbed the ledger, the photo, the envelope, all of it. My hands shook, but my voice was steady when I said, then it's time to finish this. The doors to the chapel burst open. Figures stormed inside, flashlights sweeping the shadows. Arthur stood at the front, his eyes locked on me. "Renata," he said, his voice almost pleading now. "You don't understand what you're holding. Hand it over, and this can end without blood." I raised the papers high. "No, Arthur. It ends when the truth comes out." For a moment, silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Then Arthur lunged. The stranger fired once, the sound deafening in the chapel. Chaos erupted: shouts, footsteps, the crash of glass as a candle toppled. Shadows danced across the walls like ghosts risen from the grave. I don't remember how I got outside, only the taste of cold air filling my lungs and the weight of the ledger still in my arms. The stranger grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the car hidden behind the chapel. As we sped away into the night, the chapel shrinking in the rearview mirror, I felt the first fragile thread of something I hadn't felt in years. Not safety, not yet, but resolve. My husband's voice lingered in my mind. Trust nobody. And yet, tonight, I had chosen to trust for now. I looked at the stranger beside me, his face unreadable in the passing headlights. The ledger lay on my lap, its secrets heavy but alive. "Where does this end?" I asked. His answer was simple, and it chilled me to the bone. "When you decide whether to expose them or become one of them." The road stretched into darkness, endless and unforgiving. I clutched the ledger tighter, my husband's handwriting etched in my memory. Whether he lived in flesh or only in ink, one truth remained unshaken. I was no longer the grieving widow at a graveside. I was the keeper of secrets men would kill to bury. And my story was only just beginning. This was not just the story of a funeral, or of a message whispered from beyond the grave. It was the story of what we choose when life shows us the faces of betrayal and the weight of truth. I never thought that one day I would be running through the night with secrets heavier than any coffin. But here I am, still standing, still breathing, still learning. Sometimes, life doesn't ask us if we are ready. It simply knocks at the door and says, "Trust nobody." And now, I want to ask you, my dear ones, if you were in my place, holding a truth that powerful, would you expose it to the world, or would you protect yourself and carry it in silence? Tell me in the comments, because I love hearing your thoughts. Your voices remind me that none of us walks alone, no matter how heavy our secrets may be. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. There are many more stories waiting for you, stories that can change the way you see life, and the way life sees you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.